Hey, I'm Gareth from Bokeh, and today we're talking about shooting portraits with a telephoto lens, specifically a 70-200 f2.8. Now, when you go out and shoot portraits, you might take a 50mm. My personal favorite is an 85mm, or you might take a 35mm if you want to go for a slightly wider kind of portrait. But since my favorite to shoot with is an 85mm, I found myself wondering, could I just use my 70-200 to do a whole portrait shoot? Now, I know what you're thinking, 70-200 generally would probably be more associated with things like sports, possibly wildlife, things like that. But I've used them before for portraits, it's come out really well, still got that f2.8 aperture, so I can still isolate the subject, still get some bokeh, and I wanted to try it for a whole portrait shoot with different kinds of shots, so closer shots, wider shots, so full body portraits, closer in on the face, and things like that. So I wanted to see what kinds of shots I was going to be able to get. Now, portrait lenses do have some big advantages. They tend to be prime lenses, 50, 85mm, and prime lenses tend to be sharper. The image quality tends to be better. So you get some really, really nice images out of those. They also tend to have pretty fast apertures as well. So for example, my favorite portrait lens at the moment is the 85mm f1.4, the Canon L lens. That's a really lovely lens to use for portraits. And you get that f1.4, so you just completely blur out the background. You get this lovely bokeh. In fact, some of them 1.2s as well, get it so that the face is in focus, but actually the back of the head is already starting to blur out. That can look really nice, especially if you're going for that slightly more dreamy, ethereal shot like that, where you want lots of creamy, buttery bokeh to play with. But that being said, the 70-200 f2.8 does offer a lot as well. So it's got the f2.8 aperture, which does allow you to get some nice bokeh. It does allow it to work really well with low light as well. I've used it at night with nothing but ambient lighting around to shoot portraits, and it's come out really well. Admittedly, that's not going to be as fast as something like a 1.4, even a 1.8, but it's still pretty fast. It's still not too bad at all, and you can still get that bokeh. In fact, the fact that it's a 70-200 means you can get a nice compressed look to things. Now, this is obviously personal taste. I like that a lot. I'm a big fan of the compressed glass look to things, so you can get some really nice bokeh using that combined with the fast aperture to really isolate your subject, compress the background so it looks completely blurred out. I really like that kind of shot. And the lens I was using, the Canon 70-200 f2.8 L lens, is still really nice and sharp as well. Now, there's three big advantages to using a zoom lens like this to shoot portraits. So the first big advantage is that you're able to control the crop really, really easily. So if you're in a situation where you're shooting and you've got your model to pose in a certain way and you don't want to lose that moment, you can actually just zoom in rather than having to move with the prime lens. You can just zoom straight in, less than half a second, take the shot. It also means that you can control the crop. If you're taking the shot and you realize that something's going to be just in there, you can just zoom in, zoom out if you need to get slightly more. And it can allow you a lot more versatility with the kinds of shots you're going to be able to get. Like I mentioned before as well, by zooming in, you can actually get more of a compressed look to things. So you can actually kind of increase the bokeh and the amount of blur you're going to have by zooming in. Now, the second big advantage is it allows you to control the background more easily. Now, this was an interesting one actually that I found while shooting. So when you shoot with something like a 50mm or even an 85mm, you have a certain amount of background in the shot, and that's what you have to deal with, and you need to move around until you get the composition how you'd like it. But when you shoot with a zoom lens, you can move and zoom in to get the same composition of your model, but actually limit the amount of background in the shot. So for example, take a look at this. So this is a shot with a 50mm f1.8. Now you've got some bokeh in there, I've got the model in there, nice and sharp, but in the background there's some buildings, there's some distracting elements that I would have liked to have not had in there, but I didn't really have much of an option with using this focal length. It's a prime lens, so I can't zoom in, so I can't zoom out, and I couldn't really move much because this is the shot we wanted to get. So I kind of just had to make do. Whereas using a zoom lens like the 70-200, I can zoom in, I can move, have the same shot of the model, but now I can control how much of the background you can see. So these shots were taken obviously with the 70-200, and you wouldn't know it to look at it, but we were actually in a seated picnic area of the woods. It doesn't really look like that. You can't see any of that stuff. And that's because I was able to successfully just remove those elements of the background by controlling the zoom, controlling where I stood, and it just completely allowed me to control what the shot contained. And the third big advantage of using a zoom lens like this is it does allow you to control the bokeh like I mentioned before. So if you have a close-up shot and you're shooting 200mm, you go for a close-in portrait, you are going to completely, pretty much remove that background. It's going to be completely blurred out, very compressed look to things, and you're going to isolate the subject. So if you just want a straight headshot, head and shoulders, anything like that, you're going to be able to do that by completely blurring out that background. Whereas if you pull back and you zoom out a little bit, you're going to be able to get some really nice shots with a bit of the background still visible. The background's still going to be blurred, there's still going to be bokeh involved, but it's going to be less blurred. You're still going to be able to see more of the background and be able to make out what's there. So you can kind of control, using the zoom, how much depth of field there is, how much of a compressed look you have to it, and the effects of that. And that allows you to get some really creative shots. Shooting portraits with a zoom lens is actually really interesting, and it just gives you a different perspective on how you might shoot things. So if you're out and about, if you're going to shoot portraits out and about somewhere, I would definitely recommend trying to take your zoom lens. Something like a 70-200 is perfect, but any kind of zoom lens where you can try out different focal lengths and get different results. They're actually much more versatile than you might think, and definitely worth a look. Now, if you have any questions at all, pop them down in the comments below. Get back to you as soon as possible. If you like the video, hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already. I'll see you in the next video. And as always, thanks for watching.